I want us to be at the center of solution to dismantle systemic racism, which is not something that can be done like this overnight. It takes a long time because the situation we're in now took centuries to create. And I think it starts with knowing ourselves, who we are, what we bring to the world. I think that's really, really important. And if you know who you are and what you bring to the world, then you can start, making change in a way that's quite strong, actually, not necessarily forceful, but sure of oneself.
So to kick things off, I think it's good if we can set a bit of context and background. I'd love to get into some specific themes, things like the Black Equity Organization and financial inclusion, racial equality, etc. And that, but it would be good for us to set a little bit of background and context for people who may not be familiar with yourself and the work that you do. So to kick things off, do you mind giving us a little brief introduction as to who you are and what you do?
Okay, so I'm Joyce Materego Woodall, and I work as a Chief Operating Officer at Black Equity Organization. But outside of work, I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a friend. I live in England with my husband and children. We got 5 children between us, and they are biracial. So that sort of brings its own sort of richness into our family life. But when they go out into the world, they're considered Black. So that as well, that sort of brings an element of a different kind of context to my life. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, great. So let's take it back and talk about your upbringing, how that shaped who you are. So you were born in Tanzania, right?
Yes.
Okay, so can you talk a bit about your upbringing, what the environment was like for you, and how you feel that shaped you to become the person you are today?
So I was born in Tanzania during the time when it was very positive. And thinking about Tanzania, how the years, from 0 to 10, my dad was working for the East African community as an aviation engineer, and my mom was working as a clerk, computer clerk, that kind of thing. It was a very positive time, and I came to realize later, actually, during 74, 75, 76, that time, there was a recession in England. So when we were growing up thinking the world is fantastic and it was very positive, very abundant time in Tanzania, and I think in Africa in general, in England, actually, things were not so good. But because you have this idea that in Europe things must be better, you don't know until later when you find out. And Tanzania got its independence in 1961. So my parents were the new generation that was, really optimistic, ready to build the new Africa they want to see. They were very much into music. So in my house, we would listen to Fela Kuti, to Manu Dibango of Cameroon, to Osibisa from Ghana, and a lot of music from Congo, what is known as Congo now. A lot of that, very positive, happy times. And when I went to school, primary school, I was just a child. I wasn't a Black child, if you see what I mean. So I like to think I grew up in an alternative universe where, the majority are Black people, and you have a whole spectrum of life that you have really good people, productive people, excellent people, and people who are not so excellent. But they're just human beings, so you have the whole spectrum of a human experience. If I compare that to my children over here, they go to school, and yes, they're children, but they're considered Black children. You start feeling, from a very young age, there's always feeling in forms, which ethnicity are you? I never had that growing up. And I think you have a sense of a fuller human, because you don't feel you're being categorized from a very young age. Of course, there's a tribe, which tribe you're coming from, but Tanzania was a special place because our first president made sure that everybody spoke one language. So we had Kiswahili as the national language, which now it's been recognized as the language of Africa by UNESCO, and we have 7th of July is the World Swahili Day. So we had this unity that you don't find in a lot of African countries. Yeah, so I don't know what else I can tell you.
That's very interesting, and it sets some good context actually. And one question that come to mind as you were speaking, so you said when you went to school you were just a child, and you wasn't a black child. No. But then looking at you and your work and everything you stand for now, like before we started recording, we was having a very interesting conversation. And then with the work you're involved in, like with the Black Equity Organization and the things you speak on and the topics you're passionate about, you talk a lot about race, and you work within a space or an organization that's campaigning. We'll get into that a bit more, but campaigning and working on very tangible things to bring a lot of race equality to the UK or within the UK. And I'm wondering, what did you go through any kind of experience or something? Like at what stage did you start to did the race aspect of things start to become apparent to you and important to you?
Okay, growing up, not so much. I think it was more about tribes. So growing up, in my house, we had 4 languages. My dad's tribal language, my mom's tribal language, both of them I speak a little bit, I can get by. Then we have Kiswahili and then English, which you learn, at school as well. And then I learned French when I was doing my O levels then, those ordinary levels in secondary school. So yeah, you have that. There's tribes, there is people who are educated, people who are not educated. There is also the collective knowledge and wisdom which you get from older people. Older people in Tanzania are revered, So when I came to England, for example, finding out people take their older parents to homes was a shock. I just thought, why can't you just live together with your parents? I had the honor and the privilege of being with my grandma until when she passed away. She was 81 when she passed away, but because they're so part of the community, first of all, it elongates their life. Because they feel needed and they have a role to play. They're very patient, so they teach you about the traditions, what is important in life, and they have this wisdom, which actually for me, in my philosophy around money, I think wisdom is the most important form of money, because wisdom is it's the acumen. In business world, we call it business acumen, but really it's wisdom. If you are able to make the right decisions under the circumstances you have, you will nurture your relationships, which I think are the most potent form of money. You will choose to, for example, do the right things as far as education is concerned. You will make sure you have the right relationships around you. You will nurture your intellectual property and look after it. You will save your cash when you get it as a result of good relationships. You will float ideas with people to create new things, everything with wisdom. If you don't have wisdom, nothing then comes out of that, because it's wisdom, then how you relate to people, and then everything else comes out of that, including money.
Who would you say had the biggest impact or influence on you growing up?
That's a really tough question, I think it takes a village to raise a child. It's very true, but there are a few people who stick out in my mind. Definitely my parents. My dad was always about, so he was an engineer, as I said before, but he was also a DJ. He used to play music. He was very much into the arts. My uncle, when I was growing up, was a theater actor. He's now like a filmmaker. So I grew up knowing that science and logical subjects are really important, but so are creative subjects. My dad was also into photography and sound, just sound in music, but also sound as the physics of sound. He was very interested in that as well. And he always pushed me to do better. My mom was very, very ambitious, just ambitious, but without specific things. My dad was ambitious in that he would say, this is what you're good at, and you should push for that. And I wanted to become a doctor when I was growing up and going to school. But he said, if that doesn't work out, you can retain your ambition, but always be flexible. And I think that's what helped me to say, okay, I can't do medicine for reasons I can explain later, but I can go into accounting, that kind of thing. And my uncle, who was an actor and a filmmaker now, always very influential to me. I just used to admire him. He's the one who was able to relate to everyone and anyone. He's the one who had friends who were from Tanzania and from other countries. And he just seemed like able to survive anywhere under any circumstances. Yeah, so those are the three people who influenced me.
Very, very interesting. And if we take it forward a little bit, so something you said your father told you you can retain your ambition, but you can be flexible in how you achieve that ambition. It's quite interesting because, like you said, you wanted to work in healthcare. I believe you worked in healthcare for a little bit, and then you transitioned out of healthcare into the world of finance. What was the ambition, and what made you make that switch or that change?
So when I was in Tanzania, I did my A-levels in Tanzania as well. I did physics, chemistry, and biology. Then I won a scholarship to go to study medicine in India. But when I got to India, everything was taught in Hindi. And that's language. I didn't have the language. So I decided to leave after a year. And then I came to England because at the time, Tanzania is still a part of the Commonwealth countries. But then, if you're from a Commonwealth country, you could just come to England without a visa for 6 months, and you can either go back after 6 months or decide to do something else. So I came to England, and then I started studying, and that's how I sort of went into accounting, because I was good with numbers, and I thought, well, I can do this because now we can use computers. It's not just a calculator and a briefcase.
When you moved from Tanzania, I didn't spend too long in India, about a year or so, but when you've moved over to the UK now, was it what you expected, and was there any challenges that came with the transition as well?
Yeah, so that was interesting. Coming to England, you have this idea that England is like everything is great and things are running really smoothly. And I got reality check really quickly. I came here, realized that the pavements are not made of gold. They are homeless people. And in fact, I used to, when I was single and on my own and without a family, I would just sit down with homeless people and ask them, how did you end up here? I've come here in my early 20s. I'm not homeless. And I don't have anyone in this country. And you're homeless, and you're white, you're born in this country. How? And then they would tell me their stories. But I think that's when I started thinking relationships are money. In Tanzania, people say, have a lot of children because children are wealth. But I think without realizing they're talking about relationships being money, because if you have people around you, nothing can go wrong. And if you cut yourself off from people, this is what I found out, and it's anecdotal, so it's not everyone who is homeless. Some people have got maybe addiction problems, but there's always breakdown of relationships. That's the constant. Breakdown of relationships lead to other things, or addiction to breakdown of relationships to homelessness, So that was a surprise for England. And what else? I expected a meritocratic country where you work hard and you get opportunities, and that was true. I didn't expect the racism to be so subtle. That took time to adjust. People in England are very... If there's racism, yes, it can be overt, but most of it is quite subtle. So you have to really listen and observe to know that you're being marginalized, in a lot of cases when it's not confrontational. when you're dealing with the police and they're manhandling you or something, that's different. And again, it's worse for boys and men. So I think me as a woman, I've heard a lot of stories, I've seen videos, but I haven't had that personal contact with the police in a negative way.
Yeah, I think when it comes to those different forms of racism, whether it's overt or a bit more subtle, I think a lot of black people or black British people can relate in their own different ways. You've got sometimes in a way when it's overt and it's in your face, at least you know where you stand.
Right.
When it's not, and then you have to ask yourself the question, like, oh, was that or was it not? Then that's not great. But I think a lot of people can relate to those feelings actually. And with yourself and I know you're still in finance actually, but you've been in the world of finance for a while now. And with your experiences of some of these maybe more subtle forms of racism, and also some of the lessons that the wisdom that's been passed on to you from your family, from your grandmother and whatnot, when it comes to the importance of relationships, do you feel like these two factors, and maybe any other things if you want to highlight them, but are they some of the key driving factors that have led you down the path you're on now, you know, starting your podcast and also with the Black Equity Organization?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like my whole life has prepared me to working for Black Equity Organization, because I believe, first of all, I believe that Black people as a people are just blessed with creativity. And I think a lot of the issues that are in Africa are not necessarily made by Africans themselves. They're part of the legacy of colonialism, which sort of divided the family, not in a harsh way the way slavery did, but still divided families by or generations by educating the younger people. Religion was actually used as a tool to soften people so that the colonization can take place. And then at the same time, there were ancestral religions in Africa. So Christianity comes, and then you have younger people who are taking on religion. They become ostracized by their communities, or they want to go in and convert people into Christianity, and some older people who have lived in that way for a long time, they refuse, and then that creates like a chasm within communities. So I think going to Black Equity Organization it's been my way of saying I want us to be at the center of solution to dismantle systemic racism, which is not something that can be done like this overnight. It takes a long time because the situation we're in now took centuries to create. So we need to just take the time to dismantle everything. And I think it starts with knowing ourselves, who we are, what we bring to the world. I think that's really, really important. And if you know who you are and what you bring to the world, then you can start, making change in a way that's quite strong, actually, not necessarily forceful, but sure of oneself.
Forward now and talk about the Black Equity Organization. Can you talk about, first of all, for people who aren't aware about what the Black Equity Organization is, just a little brief as to what it is, and also how it was founded. So I know it was, from my readings, it was founded on the wake of the George Floyd murder and the protests and everything that ensued after that. Can you talk about what the Black Equity Organization is, what the George Floyd murder, the impact that had on you as an individual, and also what the organization is doing to help tackle the systemic racism and things that that we've been speaking about?
Yeah, so the Black Equity Organization was formed after George Floyd was murdered. I think it was 24th of May 2020. We were all in lockdown, of course, and then this thing happens. David Lamy, MP, was talking to Kwame Kwayama, who is the artistic director of the Young Vic Theatre. And they were just having a conversation in a car saying, this has happened. And of course, you go into what usually happens in our communities: shock, disgust, rage. You go through all those emotions. And then after that, they were like, but then we need to do something, because we've been doing this for a long time, pointing out the ills or complaining, but then we need to do something. So they decided to look for other people to talk to about the idea of starting a charity or an organization. And because there were two men, they said we should speak to women. So they approached Dame Vivian Hunt, who was working as quite a senior person in Mackenzie at the time, and then Karen Blackett, who is the chair of WPP. WPP is one of the largest advertising agencies in the world. And those were the 4 founding trustees. And then others came on board. So David Olushoga is on the board as well. We had Yvonne from Ubele. We have Siobhan, who is a kind of a young backbencher from Tories, because we have David Lammy from Labour, and we wanted to be apolitical. So we have someone from the Tories party as well, and a few others. And that's how the charity was formed. We also have, I think this is very unusual actually, on our board we have a young guy called Etienne Aken, who is 20 and is on our board. He used to be a youth MP at Camden, very, very outspoken. He's now reading history in Bristol University, but he's the youngest on our board, and we're really, really proud and feel privileged to have him.
Yeah. And then also, so on what the George Floyd murder, what that how that impacted you as an individual, and then what the goals of the Black Equity Organization is in the wake of the murder.
Thank you for that prompt. So George Floyd, when he was killed, I was scared actually to watch the video. I heard a lot of things about it, but I was scared to watch the video. And I heard people complaining that it was being played out on television, re-traumatizing people, Black people in particular. And for people who were non-Black, it was sort of like, oh my God, maybe a shock, maybe, I'm not sure whether England took it well, because I think in England it was very much, this is an American problem. And then people started talking about, no, actually, we do have this issue in England too, in the UK. It may not be always overt, but it exists here as well. So we need to start doing something. Personally, after listening to all of that, then I decided to watch the video. I think it was just under 10 minutes, 9 minutes, 40 seconds or something. How someone can die in less than 10 minutes. And it was just very painful. I'm a mother. I've got a son. I've got a daughter. And between me and my husband, he's got 2 boys as well. And I was thinking it could be one of my sons. It could be my brother. It could be someone who is Black who I know anywhere. And at the time, I was just thinking something has to be done, but I didn't know I was going to end up at BEO, right? I wanted to be in an organization that is thinking of creating the world we want to see. There's a lot of movements like Black Lives Matter movement where people were I think we were all allowed to vent, to be angry, to, bring down statues and things like that. And that's fine. But for me, I think because growing up, I've seen a world that can be created by Black people and it can be good. I thought I want to be part of the change, but to create the world that I want to see. So in 2020, I was working for another organization, which is deaf-led. I think that was part of my journey as well, because it's looking after deaf people in the UK. 1 in 6 people in the UK are deaf or hard of hearing. So that's quite a high percentage. And they have a culture of their own. They have a language. They use British Sign Language, which it's been now accredited as a language in its own. And I think it's going to be infused into our education curriculum in the UK. And they have not exactly the same, but similar challenges to Black people. They're born in this country, but they don't feel like they belong. Because imagine being born in a country where you can't hear anything. So really, they feel like strangers in their own country. And for me, that was like people who are Black and have been born in the UK, always feeling a little bit like they don't belong here. You know, being asked questions like, where are you from? I'm from Tottenham, let's say. No, where are you really from? And then you realize, oh, you're talking about my skin color. I'm from here, but, you know, I look different. And deaf people are similar in that they just feel like they don't exactly belong because English is not their first language. It's their second language. Their first language is BSL, and they have their own culture. They're very direct. They're very... I can sign a little bit, only a few words, but it's very pithy because you have to use the sign to get your message across, and you can't be flowery with your language. And that I found there's a parallel between that and African languages. African languages are very pithy. We have a lot of proverbs and sayings, but we don't waste words. So, for example, in Kiswahili, for example, we have one word for like, love, being infatuated, fancying, one word. But in English, it's like many, many words, right? So I think all that has prepared me to go into BEO. Now, BEO, it's set up to dismantle systemic racism, systemic, structural, intergenerational, you know, all the issues that have happened over, say, 4 centuries. We want to dismantle that. And so it's very much about being nuanced in how we effect change, working with policymakers, pointing out and amplifying the problems, but also amplifying solutions, and working with people who are already in this space, who are smaller, who may not have the board that we have and has influence and access to corridors of power. Yeah, so that's what we are here to do, and I think it's really an important organization to exist.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
A number of very great things that you said there. I want to talk about a bit more about the BEO and the work that you guys do.
Sure.
On the systemic racism, for people who may not be very well versed on what that is and how it manifests itself, could you touch upon that? And then speak upon how the BEO is working to try and, you know, work towards dismantling that and create a more equal society for us all.
Yeah. Okay. So, systemic racism, the way I understand it and the definition we have at BEO, is the structures and practices and policies which enable one group to treat another group unfavorably based on race. So that's systemic racism, really. And how it manifests itself, for example, I'll give you an example in education, for example. If people in the West, or the majority who are white people, have been told or they understand that Black people are probably better with physical activities, not so much with cerebral activities. So you send a child to school, expectations for them to do well academically are very low. Expectations for them to do well in sports, maybe dancing, physical things, are bigger. And so also there's always a looking out, particularly for boys, that because they're physical, there's a potential for them to be violent. And if they do something which is not really understood by the teachers, they don't bother to understand. Maybe their voice is a bit of a higher register, is seen like they've got animosity, and they don't have a lot of strikes before they're either expelled from school or in worst case scenarios sent to PRUs, which are pupil referral units. And we at BO, we are doing some work around that. We believe that PRUs are like a pipeline into the criminal justice system, into jails. Black people in the UK are about 4%, just under 4%, but we have a very high percentage in the jail system, which is not really right. And then in health, I would say, because BO is working across 6 pillars. We have education, we have health, economical empowerment, justice, neighborhoods and housing, and culture. So in health, how it manifests itself, it would be, for example, Black men in particular are very, very likely to be sectioned under the Mental Health Act. And when they're being sectioned, they're treated as if they're potentially able to be violent. So if, for example, a Caucasian person is required to be calmed down and they're given an injection, for example, a Black person will be given a higher dose, which is not good because it can be harmful. But that's coming from a premise that Black people are generally violent and they're generally more physically stronger. And so to control them, you have to use more force, whether it's physical in the criminal justice system, with what happened with George Floyd, or even in healthcare system, is about overdosing them, which again, that's systemic. And it's not that people, when they go to medical school, they're trained to do this, but it's a practice and it's something that is part of their mindset, So at BO, the work we do, we have 2 approaches. One of them is we're trauma-informed. The work we do is trauma-informed. We recognize that Black people are being traumatized, and so therefore, any work that we do, we don't want to inflict more harm to Black people. And we want to, with our partners, anybody we work with, we want them to understand that and work with us from that basis. The second approach is we are working in an assets-based approach, meaning if you want to create solutions that are going to affect Black people, don't do that without us. They have to put the communities at the center, ask questions, be students of Black people, as opposed to coming with a solution that works for other races and say, this is going to work for you too, because we are slightly different. We're not worse. We're just slightly different, just the way you are different as well.
Yeah.
And then the third approach is evidence-based. So everything we do, of course, we collect anecdotal evidence. We listen to people's lived experiences, but also we take data that's already there. We apply the Black lens on that data, because a lot of the data out there is being done with the assumption that the bigger world is white, right? So we want to put the Black lens on all the work that we do and all the evidence that we present to policymakers, to people we want to collaborate with. That's what we do.
That's amazing. So it's a very inspiring vision. I think I love the fact that you're solution orientated as well, because of course we need to know the problems and highlight the problems. That's very important. We need to educate ourselves on those, but at the same time we need to be very solution orientated and say, we know what the problem is, we organize, we have our pillars, and these are the solutions we're going to present so that we can tackle some of these problems in the way that systemic racism manifests itself and work towards a better world. And as you were speaking, something come to my head. One of my guilty pleasures that my wife has got me into. I'll blame her.
Blame the wife. We get blamed for so many things. It's not fair.
I'll blame her for this. I've been watching Love. Do you watch Love Island?
My daughter does. I stay away from it.
Okay. So I've been watching Love Island.
Yeah.
And then we're watching it last night. And there's a guy, he's a white guy. And then there was a challenge where the girls had to throw a pie in someone's face, and he got a pie thrown in his face. And he was like, the girls, I think, he said something afterwards. I can't remember what he was like, shut up. He's like, shut up, man. But he said it with like so much of him.
Right.
And everyone was laughing. And then we was talking, it was like, all right, cool. If it was a black guy, shut up, man. Like that. Like, people will be like, this guy's aggressive, you know, Ofcom complaints, all sorts of things, but it's perception, that unconscious sort of perception that we talk about. And I don't know if we're talking about it here or just before, because we were talking this before, but about that unconscious bias and the ways in which it manifests itself. So for example, you're talking about this healthcare example where a black patient is more likely to get administered a higher dose, which can be potentially dangerous. The healthcare professional might not even realize, probably don't. They probably don't even realize they're just doing it because they think, oh, we need to calm this person down, something like that, and go to administer the dose without even realizing that on a subconscious or unconscious level that they've gone to administer the higher dose. They wouldn't even know until maybe someone checks them on that.
Right.
But that's one of the ways in which these unconscious biases can manifest itself. And that's just one very specific example, but it manifests itself in so many different ways, in so many different shapes and forms, and isn't great. On the wealth side of things, so that's one of your pillars, and I know that's more your background. You come from a finance background. You speak a lot about the wealth, particularly from a very interesting angle, from your philosophical relational angle. What are some things that an individual can do? And actually, even before we get there, because we're talking like wealth from the relational angle, and it's interesting when you're talking about the makeup of the BEO, when you've got your trustees and everything like that, and then they can help you and the team to access certain rooms and certain people to help drive the kind of change you want to drive, and that's through relationship. And that's something you talk about a lot when it comes to wealth building.
For sure.
What are some of the ways in which some individuals, Black British individuals, can work towards increasing their wealth as an individual? What do you think are some important facets to?
Okay, so I think I spoke about this before, particularly with, I don't know if it's just younger people or it's because I hear it a lot from them. They have I've got to hustle and get my bag and things like that. And every time I hear that, I just smile and shake my head because I think what are you doing getting the bag? Where are you getting the bag from? To me, it just paints a picture of almost grabbing, the bag with money from someone. I think what everybody can do, not just young people, is to really nurture the relationships they have from a very, very young age. I think we should teach our children. We should all teach our children and ourselves, just to remember that. I believe relationships are like the most potent form of money. So if I take an example of BEO, we are in a really lucky position that we are very well funded. We have, most charities have got restricted funding, which they have to apply only to certain projects. Most of the funds we have is unrestricted, meaning we've been given funds to think through a solution, a long-term solution, put a team together that can effect that solution and work over a few years. And then we can show this is what we've done, whether it's research, maybe change of a policy, and then they can give us more money. We wouldn't be able to have the cash that we have now in the bank if it wasn't for the relationships that our board has with funders and all the people they've met and kept in touch with and maybe collaborated with or worked for or worked with in a positive way, right? So that's what I mean when I say relationships are a potent form of money. On an individual basis, it's exactly the same. If we are taught to relate to one another so that we can create together, then money will follow. If you're going as an individual by yourself, you present yourself in the best way possible and people remember you for the right reasons, your reputation will grow. That's how you get. There's a difference between reputation and fame. Fame, of course, can be a form of reputation, but if you have a good reputation, it comes from you doing something right, yes? And then other people will be wanting to work with you because they know if they work with you, chances of their project succeeding is high. And then when you're paid, you can share the money. But really, it's from relationships through reputation, ideas and vision, intellectual property, knowledge. Everything comes from relationships. But then also it has to start with the relationship with yourself. So when you were asking me about individuals, what they can do, it's just looking at yourself as well, and having, first of all, a relationship with yourself, knowing that you have something to offer in the world. Everybody has something to offer. You just have to look for who is willing to either pay you or exchange something with you for what you've got to offer, right? And then in looking at yourself, there's another form of money, I think, is knowledge. When you know yourself, you have to know a few things. One of them, you have to know what you love doing. And then you have to know what you're really good at doing. And then you have to know what is needed by the world and what you can get paid for. And the intersection of those four things is the beauty spot. If you're there and then you start collaborating with people and forming relationships, there's no way you're going to end up without any money.
The intersection of those four things is where you find
it's where
bag.
you find the bag. Yeah, exactly.
That's where it is.
Exactly. So you have to just do something you love, something you're good at, something the world needs, and something you can get paid for. And just do the things, the cash will follow. So I think the money that we all talk about as money is cash, but it is a result of managing all these other forms of money. And the best thing that ties everything with a bow is acumen, wisdom. So if you're wise enough to nurture your relationships and everything else, then you'll be fighting the money off. It will just come, it will follow you.
Can you talk about that nurturing relationship side of things? So we've got the reputation side of things. So make sure you understand yourself and what you have to offer to the world and everything like that. But and then on top of that, when you develop your reputation, you can help you with your relationship building. But on the relationship building side of things, first of all, how do people even develop relationships with the right sorts of people and then nurture those after they've developed them?
I think it's like a muscle. It's like a muscle. I believe relationships are formed through having a common language, first of all, right? So if you're able to relate to people, it basically starts with, hello, how are you? My name is, and this is what I do, right? Or it doesn't have to be a very direct question. It has to be just talking to people and then finding out more about them as you go along. I was struck by the education system in the UK, how it works, that some children go to comprehensive schools, some children go to fee-paying schools. Most of the fee-paying schools, children are sent to those schools and they're already taught from a very young age that they're going to be part of an alumni. And that's where they start forming relationships. So there are people who are, even people who run this country, the white people, they've gone to schools like Eton. They've known each other, some of them from when they were like 9. You know, they go to university, they're forming relationships and friendships which last for years. And I think that's the same thing that can be done in the Black community. And we have a saying in Africa that if you want to go quickly, go by yourself, but you won't go too far. So getting the bag, for me, is going quickly. So you may be paid, it'll be very transactional, do something, get paid quickly, and then that's it. And then in a few months' time, the cash is gone. But if you're relational, if you're nurturing relationships and you're making sure that, first of all, you know what you can offer, find out what others can offer to you, but not with the intention of taking, with the intention of collaborating over a long time, then in time, just the payments will start coming in. I believe that because I am, case in point, I came to this country when I was in my early 20s. I have no family here. And throughout my whole life here in the UK, it's been about meeting people, showing what I can do, knowing what I can do well, showing what I can do, learning with people, sharing ideas, receiving ideas, creating, whether it's intellectual property or acquiring property as in land, and just nurturing those things. That's what has ensured that I'm financially stable, and I would say successful, not in a financial sense of just having a lot of cash in the bank, but also the strong relationships I have around me, personally and professionally.
So what does success, you've spoken about the relationships and that being a form of success, what does success look like for you? Is there anything that you're striving for personally? I mean, now it's for me, success is feeling useful in life, feeling that I'm contributing to the world. And again, you can't contribute if you don't have relationships to contribute to, right? So I think that for me is success. Success is meeting new people every day. Meeting you, that's success. It's like, when you're not, it's through my work. You found what I do, and you thought this is an interesting person to talk to. For me, that's success. I think the more people you are interacting with, the more people you can connect. So I know, I connected you to a few other people. I think the more you connect people, the stronger the net. For me, it's sort of like a net. The stronger the net, and then the stronger the whole community becomes strong together. So for me, that's success. Success is not buying the newest car or having the biggest house. Material things they're a result of success, not the other way around. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And on what you said, like with thank you first of all what you said about meeting me, and with regards to you yourself, because I came across your profile. I've seen the BEO for a while, and I came across your profile, I think on LinkedIn, and I was looking into you, and I was like, definitely, because first of all, your background in of itself is great. I love the angle that you come from, and on top of that, the BEO and what the BEO stands for in working to dismantle systemic racism is a very important and not even noble, because I feel like that kind of makes it sound as if you're doing something nice, but it's needed. It's a must. You need it. Like in this country, we talk about forms of systemic racism, and when I look at some of these stats and in very generally speaking, when you look at stats, very generally, like wealth gaps and educational attainment and prison pipeline, etc. Very generally speaking, you're going to find black groups or ethnic minorities at the very least towards the bottom end of all of these negative metrics. Most times, wager all times, but I can't say every single time. So 9 times out of 10, you're going to find that. That's a serious problem. Yeah, very serious problem, and it's something that we shouldn't have been allowed to happen. I think that if all things being equal, that these things wouldn't exist, because it just wouldn't happen. The law of averages, things just average out, and there wouldn't be differences like that, racialized differences, but they are. And there's causes for those racialized differences, and then we've just got to do something to challenge those so that we can get back to a better society for us all. So when I see what you and the team are doing, I'm like, of course, we should be here. We need some representation here for sure. So I'm happy to have you. And hear everything you've said about relationships as well. It's like I've taken so much away on that relationship aspect. Is very, very important. I think the way you've spoken about it and the way you spun it isn't a way I've heard people necessarily talk about it before. I've heard people talk about wealth and wealth building in more, a bit more of a generic sense, and some, good bits of advice here and there, but I don't think I've heard anyone stress on the importance of relationships the way that you have. So that's very good. And
I Tevin, I think it's relationships, but I think also with wisdom. So if for example you've nurtured the relationships, you've got like not a windfall or maybe a stream of cash coming your way, then you have to apply the wisdom to save and then invest that cash, right? I think that's another, it's a tenet of financial success for sure. But I think even my understanding of the work that we do at BO, being trauma-informed, when a people has been traumatized over so long, you hear a lot of people saying, well, I grew up with nothing, so now I've come into money, I want just to spend and just spoil myself and stuff. This is the work that we need to do within our own community, right? To just, I think it's the mindset that buying a lot of material things is not necessarily wealth. You know, you may be able to show it outside, but then think about this. If someone is a millionaire, it's because they didn't spend $1 million.
Oh, yeah.
Not because they're spending money. They became a millionaire because they did not spend $1 million. So saving is really like, it's almost like if you can't save, you don't deserve to have financial success, you know. But as a group, as a demographic in the UK, we keep, for every pound that we earn, we keep only 10%, only 10p, whereas other groups like the white groups, they keep 90p. Now, there's so many variables to that. Some of them are individualistic, that people are not saving. We haven't grown with this mentality that we should save, or it's been so, the austerity has been so hard in the Black community that when people come into money, they want to spend. There's also another part that, you know, there's no opportunities. So people would go to apply for jobs, for example, you hit the glass ceiling, or you even don't get in the first place because of unconscious bias or what have you, or sometimes overt racism, you know. But if you're lucky to get everything together, say you're a footballer, for example. This is an example of people who are, they do what they love, they do what they're good at, and people want to pay for it, right? And it's needed by the world. People want to be entertained by footballers. So they've got that, those 4 things are there. And then their relationships will be their fans, the team they're playing with. You know, if they're not very good with their teammates, they can be kicked out. So you see, relationships are always there. But once they receive them, because they get paid quite a lot of money, wisdom comes in. How do you then nurture the actual cash you have? Do you invest in properties? Do you save it? Do you invest in shares? All that needs to happen. And that's where you can be educated, but if you don't make a decision yourself through your own wisdom, the cash can just go.
What resources would you recommend on the wisdom front? How to manage money better?
My favorite book is the Richest Man in Babylon.
Yeah.
That I recommend to everybody to read that book. That one, and then The Psychology of Money, which is quite new actually, and it's quite verbatim, but it's quite pacey. There's a lot of stories in there which are you read and you go, yeah, I recognize that. But The Richest Man in Babylon is like a fable. I think it was published in 1928, which tells you that money problem is a human condition. It's been with that since time immemorial, and I think it's a really great book. I recommend it to everyone.
That's great.
Yeah.
And I'm aware of the time. I think we've gone over.
So that's fine.
I apologize, but I've really enjoyed speaking with you.
Thank
and
you.
Just as we prepare to wrap up, what advice would you give to anybody listening who's wanting to make some change in their life or in their community?
Start Start anywhere you are. Start small. I started with my podcast is can I just talk about it a little bit? Of
course, yeah.
Mind on Your Money, and I talk about money having 7 forms, and cash is the most famous. Everybody talks about when they say someone's got money, it's cash, but I think there are other 6 forms of money which need to be nurtured in order for somebody to have the cash, which is what we know as the most famous form of money. I would say that I wanted to do that as me effecting change in the world before I joined BEO. So now I've joined BEO, I'm doing this as part of my professional life, but also outside of work, I'm still doing the podcast. I talk to everybody who would listen about money. Again, there's a stigma around talking about money. I don't think there should be a stigma, because if you don't, the surest way of failing to tackle a problem is not talking about it. So if you have issues around economical issues or empowerment or financial inclusion, we need to start discussing. And we need to discuss the factors which are preventing us from being successful outside of our community and within our community, within our families, within our own personal relationships. So yeah, that's what I would say. If you want to effect change, start creating the world you want to see.
That's it. Amazing. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Really, really enjoyed our conversation today. If people want to keep up to date with yourself and the work that maybe you or the BEO do, how can they best do so?
Well, we have our website. So if you just Google Black Equity Organization, it will come up. We're on Twitter as well, at blackequity.org, and on LinkedIn as well. We're posting a few things, but Twitter mostly. Okay. Yeah, and then on Instagram. We do have a YouTube channel as well, but that is sort of taking time to come into its own. I think the more we have content, the more we'll have followers. But yeah, that's where we are online. We work in a hybrid model. And with me, I'm just on LinkedIn.
Great. Great. And have you got any final words you want to share before we wrap up? Or
thank you for having me. I actually feel very privileged to be one of 1,000 voices. You know, I was going to ask you why did you choose me, but you explained that a little bit. I feel very privileged to be part of this project that you're working on. I think it's a very important project, really. I think what you're doing as well is to highlight the positive side of our community, which is, it needs to be seen, it needs to be heard. And I would be very happy to spread the word. Make sure everybody and their mother listens to this podcast.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you for coming on once again. We really appreciate you coming on and sharing all of the wisdom you have today. If you're listening, if you haven't subscribed, please do subscribe, like, and share this episode. Like and share everything we do as much as you can. We're working to interview 1,000 Black British change makers, people who are driving a lot of positive change and putting out more positive stories out there. So anything you can do to support and get these good messages out as far and wide, please do. Like, share, tell your friends that you've shared to like, and also share with their friends, and let's get the ball rolling. But that's that for now. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for coming to the podcast once again, Joyce.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's been great.
Oh, thank you. It's definitely been great. Definitely. This is 1,000 Voices. And for now, people, we're out.